When audiences first saw Obi-Wan Kenobi training Luke Skywalker aboard the Millennium Falcon in A New Hope, it seemed like a simple exchange. A mysterious old Jedi giving a curious farm boy a crash course in the Force. But what we saw in the movie was only a fraction of what actually happened. According to the Canon novel The Princess, the Scoundrel, and the Farm Boy, the full scene reveals that Obi-Wan gave Luke a much deeper, more meaningful lesson. One that planted the seeds for Luke's eventual rise as a Jedi. In this video, we'll break down everything Obi-Wan taught Luke during their very first Force training session aboard the Millennium Falcon, and how it helped shape the future of the Jedi. After escaping Tatooine with Leia's message and a narrow dodge of the Empire's ships, the Millennium Falcon hurtled through hyperspace. As Han Solo worked on repairs and adjustments, Obi-Wan took Luke aside for his first real training session. The Falcon, though battered and noisy, became the classroom where a boy from the desert began his transformation into a Jedi. Luke stood in the middle of the ship, grasping his lightsaber. Obi-Wan patiently adjusted Luke's grip, repositioned his elbows, and corrected his stance. It was awkward, but there was a quiet dignity to the lesson. Obi-Wan wasn't rushing. He wasn't there to impress. He was doing what Jedi Masters had done for generations, teaching with intention. Obi-Wan began by explaining the Force in simple but profound terms. He told Luke that the Force was not some abstract power or distant myth. It was an energy field created by all living things. It surrounded them, penetrated them, and connected everything in the galaxy. Planets, people, stars, even thoughts and emotions, they were all part of this grand web of life. He described how the Jedi didn't just learn to wield the Force as a weapon. They learned to feel it, to understand its currents and rhythms. It was a guide, not a tool. The Force offered insight and clarity, but only to those who listened with calm minds and open hearts. Obi-Wan emphasized that it wasn't about control or dominance, it was about harmony and balance. As Luke tried to wrap his head around these ideas, Obi-Wan explained that the Force had two sides, the light and the dark. The light side was rooted in peace, patience, compassion, and selflessness. It was the foundation of the Jedi's code and their path. The dark side, however, was fueled by emotion. Fear, anger, hatred, and a thirst for power. It was quicker, more seductive, but ultimately corrupting. Luke asked why anyone would choose the dark side if it led to ruin. Obi-Wan answered that many were tempted by its immediacy. It offered shortcuts, an illusion of strength without the discipline, but those who fell into it were eventually consumed by it. Power without purpose led only to destruction. The lesson was heavy, but Obi-Wan didn't rush. He let Luke ask questions, pausing often to ensure the young man was following. It was more than just a lecture. It was the first time Luke began to see the galaxy in a new way, not as a place of chaos and coincidence, but as a living, breathing system held together by something greater than himself. Nearby, Han Solo watched the training with skepticism. He rolled his eyes at the whole display, muttering that it was all luck and superstition. The idea of an invisible energy field guiding destinies seemed laughable to a man who had built his life on speed, blasters, and cunning, but Obi-Wan didn't argue. He simply smiled and let the results speak for themselves. When Luke succeeded, Han fell silent for a moment, not convinced, but no longer laughing either. Obi-Wan's calmness contrasted sharply with Han's bravado. That contrast wasn't lost on Luke. It planted a question in his mind. What if the galaxy really was guided by something more than chance? Obi-Wan used the moment to expand Luke's understanding. The Jedi, he explained, were not just warriors. They were peacekeepers, diplomats, guardians of harmony. Their strength came not from aggression, but from restraint. The lightsaber wasn't a tool of violence, it was a symbol of their commitment to defense, never attack. He told Luke that Jedi only fought when there was no other choice, and even then, they sought resolution, not dominance. Compassion and serenity weren't weaknesses, they were sources of strength. Luke nodded slowly, understanding more with each sentence. He was beginning to see that becoming a Jedi wasn't just about swinging a saber, it was about living with purpose, discipline, and empathy. To help Luke move beyond theory and begin actually feeling the Force, Obi-Wan introduced two important tools for their next step in training: a blast helmet and a floating seeker droid. The blast helmet, with its visor completely lowered, blinded Luke to the outside world. This was no accident. It was meant to take away the one sense he relied on most, forcing him to engage the Force directly rather than through sight. Luke hesitated at first, feeling awkward as the helmet pressed down and sealed him into darkness. Without his eyes, he felt exposed and unsteady, but Obi-Wan stood nearby, calm and encouraging. He told Luke that seeing was only one way to understand the world. To truly become a Jedi, he had to learn to feel. Then, with a subtle flick of a switch, the seeker droid activated. It floated silently for a second, then fired a stun blast. Luke yelped, twisting and swinging blindly. He missed, and the droid struck again. Obi-Wan stopped the exercise briefly and told Luke that reacting wasn't the goal. The Force wasn't about reacting, it was about sensing, anticipating, listening. Luke steadied his breathing. The noise of the Falcon faded. Han's sarcastic commentary in the background dulled to a hum. Luke began to stretch out with his feelings, not physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Obi-Wan urged him to stop fighting and start allowing the Force to guide his hand. The Seeker attacked again, but this time, Luke's saber intercepted the stun blast. It wasn't perfect. His stance was still rough, his confidence shaky, but it was a breakthrough. For the first time, Luke truly connected to something larger than himself. Obi-Wan watched quietly, offering subtle nods of approval. He knew Luke was still at the very beginning of his path, but this moment, this single deflection was everything. It meant Luke had opened the door, and for Obi-Wan, that was enough. For now. By the time the Millennium Falcon dropped out of hyperspace, Luke was no longer just a farm boy from Tatooine. He wasn't a Jedi, not yet, but he had taken the first step. He had learned that the Force was more than just magic or myth. It was real, it was alive, and with it came responsibility. Obi-Wan had taught him to feel, not to see, to trust, not to force, to believe, not just to act. It was a foundation Luke would carry into every battle, every hardship, every choice. And though the path ahead would be painful and full of loss, it all began here, in the heart of a battered freighter with a mentor who believed. The first lesson aboard the Millennium Falcon was more than just practice with a lightsaber. It was a rite of passage. It marked the start of Luke's transformation and the rebirth of the Jedi way. Obi-Wan didn't simply train him, he awakened something in him. He reminded Luke that the galaxy still had room for hope, for compassion, for light. And for the first time, Luke Skywalker understood that he had a place in that greater story. Because the Force wasn't just in the stars, it was in him. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. Make sure to like and subscribe if you did, and as always, may the Force be with you.